Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I'm 𝗃𝗲𝗄𝗵 and my mission is to inspire you to rise up, grow, stand out, and take action towards the next level of your life. I interview leaders, influencers, entrepreneurs, authors, exceptional people who can and will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week and make sure you subscribe to the podcast to get the episodes as soon as they are released. In today's show, I am delighted to speak with Jen Atman. Jen, you are a soul evolution coach and energy medicine specialist, and a leading expert on how to break free of negative life experiences for good. You are well known in your industry for helping people heal from toxic relationships and past traumas. You believe that everyone can live a life of their dreams, and during your 21-plus year career, you have helped thousands of people worldwide to live a life filled with potential, purpose, and ease. Jen, welcome to the show. It is a real pleasure to be speaking with you today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Shall we start with a little bit of background of your story, Jen? So, if I were to ask you to share with us maybe a milestone or a key defining moment that will, make this conversation that will follow more relevant, what would you say?
Mm-hmm. I think a defining point in my life was when I finally broke free of a really, really toxic relationship. And it made me realize so many things in walking through that experience because it was so profoundly uncomfortable. And when I finally was able to break free from it, I realized how much I was focusing on other people, their needs or expectations, and not on my own at all. And so it really, after that relationship ended, I decided to really take a deep dive into all of the limiting beliefs that I have carried with me throughout my life that landed me in this place, in this relationship, and really start to get in touch with who am I as a person, who I am as a person, what I want, and why I allowed that into my experience in the first place. So that to me was a completely pivotal point when life got so loud and uncomfortable that I really had to stop and take a deep look at what am I doing and why am I drawing this in? Because I want to stop doing that. So that was probably the biggest point for me in the change.
I think many of us have had a similar turning point or point of complete discomfort that you need to do something about it. What did you do next as a next step, if I can ask?
Yeah, I really decided to pretty much stop everything that I was doing, because if we continue to do the same things, we're always going to draw on the same experiences, right? So I basically stopped doing everything that I was doing before and just refocused on myself, my needs. And at that point, I was so depleted energetically, financially, mentally, emotionally, that I couldn't focus on other people, which was the first time in my life that happened, that I couldn't brush myself off, get back up and help somebody. I was like, I've got nothing. I got nothing at this point. So I really needed to take time and solitude and some isolation and just really heal. So it really was distancing myself from a lot of the experiences of normal, like 3D life experience, going out and hanging out, doing all these things, and really just went in and got quiet with myself and started to explore much deeper everything that was happening in my inner worlds until I started to gain some understanding of it. And what I found was fascinating because there's so much going on in there that is just like this endless playground of experiences that we can have is if we just have curiosity and start to ask what's going on in there and why do I feel this way and what can I do about it. And so I just really started to understand everything. And I'm pretty analytical as well as spiritual. So my mind wanted to be really active and understand everything, which I feel helps me to become a better teacher because I've walked through the experience. I understand it emotionally. And then I also understand all the moving parts about how to heal. So for me, it's about being kind of a student of life and having the experiences as well as being able to share that information and help others to thrive. and maybe not necessarily have to go deep diving into crisis mode before they can shift and make changes in their life. So try to kind of help people and catch them before they have to, life gets really loud. So we don't have to get into that deep state of suffering, but we can make changes just because we just got some discomfort in our lives instead.
You reminded me of that phrase that says that people change either out of inspiration or of desperation. So I think it's much, much better to change out of inspiration before we have to change.
For sure. So true.
Jean, I wanted to ask you some of the elements of what it is that you do. So I wanted to start with healing and energy healing in particular. I see that you have a bachelor's degree in psychology and you studied many different energetic modalities. So do you want to explain a little bit about all that and about energy healing?
Absolutely. So my life started out, I've always been a really sensitive child, and I grew up in a household of very traditional values. My mom was actually a nun, and my dad was a brother, and they met through their music and their religious career, and they had to get a dispensation from the Pope to get married. So I grew up in an extremely traditional Catholic household. And so I come in having memories of past lives and exactly what happened before I incarnated into this lifetime, and talking about all these things that I'm sure will leave my mom, turning in her grave after she finally crosses. But she thought, what is going on with this kid? And I would see things in our house, and it was really always very connected to the outer realms and the subtle things of what happens around us that a lot of people didn't seem to pick up on around me. So it left me kind of feeling like there was something wrong with me, possibly that I was different in all these ways. And I also grew up with a lot of toxicity and abuse, narcissistic personalities, sociopathic personalities in my household. And so I got really good at reading the room because just out of safety, making sure that if they're okay, then I'm okay. So with the connection to the outer realms, as well as my ability to start reading energy, it really turned into sort of gifts as I evolved and was able to get, sort of remove myself from those experiences. And then, clearly, as I talked about that narcissistic relationship, when I was drawing in more of that outside of the family, I finally started to get clear about how I was creating my reality. So emotionally, energetically, it's been a very personal journey. Professionally, I got introduced to Reiki in 2000. And my Reiki master, he and his wife are my kids' godparents. I mean, we're still really close. But during my first attunement, it was just the most amazing thing, because after the attunement happened, I walked outside to just sit and just be for a little while. And I realized that every single leaf on the tree was energy. It no longer had the form of a leaf, but it was energetic vibration, all these little particles that were moving, that were making up the world. And I thought, oh my gosh, everything is energy. And we hear that, but to witness it and see it was very, very profound for me. And I was sold. And what was so great about the experience was because I always knew these things. I played with energy before that, but I didn't understand that other people did as well. So when I found that this is actually a thing and that other people are practicing this and doing this, it made me feel like I finally found home. I finally found other people who get me, that I can relate with and learn from, because I knew this was within me, but I didn't know what it was or what to do with it. So as soon as that attunement happened, that started my energetic modality. And I've taken as many energetic modality trainings as I can possibly find, just to start to understand what's happening within me and be able to apply that to my practice.
Does each of these modalities give you a different level of understanding then?
It does. It really does. And I pull, people sometimes will call me for a Reiki session, and I don't just do Reiki just because there's so much of an integration that happens within my work. So each modality provides different tools. And what helped me along the way was sort of the structure of each one, because I could understand that system to entertain my analytical mind, understand that system and be able to practice within the framework of something. And then I would start to evolve it into my own perspective of it, my own integrated modality of it. So everything just sort of kept evolving throughout life. And in 2011, I opened to channel with the Ascended Masters and Archangels. And that changed everything, because when you have direct source guidance to questions you have in present time, it's a game changer. So I spent basically 2012 in meditation, because it was so entertaining speaking with all these outer realm beings that I don't even know if I left my house for most of 2012. Because when you can get so much guidance from up above and you can feel the truth and the resonance of it, it feels, just so aligned and so peaceful and true and safe, I guess.
I can only imagine, Jen. I actually had recently a conversation in my podcast with someone who was channeling as well, and I actually had the opportunity to ask during the interview to the stream and gain and it was some incredible insights. And I know that these things, there are many preconceptions and that many people have prejudices against all these things, and maybe it is not because they don't understand, but I would certainly like your comment about, people that completely will discard something like this as, not valid or not true. I know that these are not the people who listen to this, because they won't be listening right now anyway. However, I think it is very, I always find that interesting about, the collective, because most people do not see it. I don't know if you agree with me.
I do. And, getting into Reiki about 2 decades ago, where this was not acceptable, it was not accepted, and people thought it was really strange and weird. And it's always sort of been something that, especially in our country, in America at least, that we're not taught these things. We're not open to these types of experiences too much. We're not involved with meditating and just being in the stillness and being able to connect. And really, it's just a sense of connection to yourself. And I do believe that it's so important to honor everybody on their path. And if it's not resonant with someone, then it's not meant to be in their experience right now. So I think that if someone feels like they'd like to engage with it, then there is something that is in that field saying there might be a calling there for you, and to see where that leads you. And if people are like, that's a little woo-woo and that's a little crazy, then that's okay too, and they might be in a more linear pathway in some other types of experiences. So I think it really is about just honoring what every person has within their life experience.
So right. And it's interesting what you said, that at that time Reiki was not accepted. And I think generally right now, more and more people are seeking for something different than how it has been up to now. So they're more open to spirituality, or what you call the woo-woo in a sense, which I always laugh when I hear that phrase. But it's many people say that, and it kind of sounds. So I think there is a general movement, or a general. You used the word curiosity earlier towards that. So I would like also some of your thoughts about what's happening
in the world. That's a big question. Well, from a planetary perspective, from a spiritual perspective, we knew as a community that 2020 was going to be a big year. And from a spiritual perspective, we have talked about the process of ascension for a long time. So everything is energy, and people think that energy might be a little out there, but energy is science. Everything is made of energy. You can't be created or destroyed. It's transmuted. And so when you can start to see the science behind it, that might be helpful for some of those more grounded thinkers about how does this really work? And I think about energy the same way that we're speaking right now, or that you call someone on a cell phone, you tune into a specific frequency and you can read and receive information back and forth. Energy and remote healing works the same way. But to circle back around to your question, right now the earth is going through an ascension process. So it has a vibration that is currently its frequency. So within ascension, the earth herself, her frequency is starting to elevate and vibrate at a higher frequency. So what happens within that is there are lower density aspects of life, which include emotions like guilt and shame and blame and jealousy, envy. Those are considered sort of lower density. So if the earth, who all these inhabitants live on the earth, if the earth is at a lower density, we all will match that frequency, which has been kind of dense and heavy. But as the earth rises in her frequency, we all are encouraged to also match that frequency. So if anything that is in our energetic system that competes with that higher frequency, it surfaces to be purged. So you might see people really feeling like, holy cow, life is so intense right now. These emotions are surfacing. I don't know what to do with this stuff, because we are unable now to stuff these things back down just because we're being nudged, and then sometimes not too gracefully, into a higher frequency. So anything conflicting of that has to be moved outward. So people might be experiencing more crisis now, or the things that are in their experience that aren't working might be louder, getting their attention in greater ways to say, look at this, it's not working. What can we do to change it? So there's those people that are on the path where they're, just minding their own business, living their lives, and all these things are happening. And they're like, what's going on? And then there's people that are intentionally saying, we know that this clearing is happening. So what can we do to help facilitate it, to make more ease around this type of experience of clearing? So either way, we're all moving into a beautiful state of evolution. It's whether you choose to do it kicking and screaming or a little bit more gracefully.
I liked very much some phrases that you used. It was I think, very carefully explained. And you said, I remember you said that we are encouraged to rise with the rising vibration. So we're not, forced. We are encouraged, but
Right.
there is lots of resistance
Yes.
if you don't. And you also said about things that come to surface to be purged while this process is happening. Is there something that you would facilitate this purging or make it easier maybe for people who realize that, yes, this is going on, but it is very uncomfortable? How can I move towards that with less resistance, with more, grace, if possible?
Yes. I think the main component is really starting to understand ourselves at a deeper level. Because when we are born into this lifetime, say we have parents that, for instance, in my household, very sort of unstable emotionally. So there are certain belief systems that I developed as a child. And I realized that as those belief systems continue to be validated throughout my life, these loud experiences would come in, these narcissists would come in. So it's like taking the experience of what your life is currently, seeing what's not working. Where if you're suffering in any particular part of your life, that is information that says something is in conflict with your innate self. Something is uncomfortable. It needs to be purged and cleared. But what happens is people will look at all the details. Well, this person said this and did that, and then this happened and that happened. And it gets people spinning and confused and continuing to focus outward. But when you turn that focus inward, sort of reverse engineer things, you can start to say, okay, so why am I in this relationship that doesn't feel good? Why am I in this toxic relationship? What's happening within me that says that's okay? How am I, as far as worthiness, to have a healthy relationship? Do I love myself enough to say no to things that don't feel good? So when you start to turn that energy and focus inward, you really can correct so much. But it really is a conscious effort to remove the focus from the details and focus it back inward where real change can be made.
And Jen, when you say focusing inwards, do you mean that at a psychological level or at a spiritual level, or both? So describe a bit more in detail how you mean it going inwards.
That's a really good question. So we have different bodies. We have our emotional body, right? So we have triggers. So those are wonderful gifts of nuggets of information, because if a trigger comes in, you know it, you feel it, and you're like, that sucks. I don't like that. And so that's information. So emotionally, you get information. Mentally, when you find yourself in those loops of regretting the past or in fear of the future, you're creating suffering mentally, right? In your spiritual body, if you have any sort of, things from the past that continue to repeat themselves, you're evolving through those karmic cycles. And when those karmic cycles surface, it's really asking for you to pay attention to that, to nurture it and to heal it. We're not meant to stay in these states of looping suffering. We're meant to have something get our attention to say something needs to be healed. So, and the physical body, if you have pain in the physical body, anytime there's pain, it's just simply stuck energy. So that's why I love energy healing so much, because you can basically, and like I just said, anytime there's pain, it's just stuck energy, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, energetic, spiritual. So when you start to clear the energy body, you remove everything that's attached to it. So in my work, I specifically deal with limiting beliefs that create negative experiences on repeat for people. So when we go in and we see where that limiting belief is, we start to energetically clear that, as well as bring the cognition of how they're repeating that throughout their lives, how they're reinstating that on a daily basis. We start to make those corrections. You start to see life change really rapidly. But until you identify what's going on inside, it's really hard to make changes. You're just kind of shooting in the dark, hoping that something works. So I know that was a really complex question. So to simplify, I would say, recognizing anytime that you're in a state of suffering, that something is surfacing to be healed. So recognizing if it's uncomfortable, if you're being triggered, if you're mentally looping through things, it's information that something's ready to be healed. And so taking that time to just go within and, even if it's a walk, it doesn't have to be a week-long retreat. It can be a walk, and you can just pose the question to yourself, what's going on in there? What do I really need? How can I separate myself from this negative experience? What's asking to be healed? And when you start to do self-care like that, because that's real, that self-care and soul care is just asking, what do I need? And how can I meet those needs for myself? And when you start to meet those needs for yourself, you're going to be less dependent or codependent on other people, because you're feeling very fulfilled and satisfied within.
Thank you. You said about self-care and soul care, and I wanted to ask you, it's relevant to the work that you do, that you are a soul evolution coach. That was the title. So can you tell me how that relates to this self-care and soul care, as you said?
Yeah. And so sometimes I'll call myself a self-mastery mentor, soul evolution coach. It's been kind of hard to define, just because there's so much that we work on within session. Yes. There's not one thing that changes, but everything changes. Life changes. You basically up level into a new platform in life. And so, but basically what we're doing is that we're evolving our spirits. So we're here during this incarnation to evolve. We're not here to make the millions. We're not here to have all these things, that we're trained or taught to think, to believe, but we're really here as souls to evolve. And we evolve through lessons.
Yes.
And sometimes we evolve through tough lessons. So, and I love that old saying where if someone were to look at a seed in its period of growth, it would look like mass destruction because it breaks open, but that's kind of how growth and evolution sometimes works, where we really do need to break through and break free of all the old in order to be able to bloom and evolve into something new. So when you can start to look at experiences as evolutionary path, I'm here because I chose before I even came here to walk through this lesson in order to learn that and move on to the next thing. And I'm in this process of healing the old cycles so I can open up to having new experiences. That's why we're here having this experience. But sometimes people get so sort of scared or hold a lot of fear around having experiences because they're not sure what's going to happen or if they're going to be okay. But if you go into an experience knowing, I signed up for this and I signed up for it because I know I can do it. And it's like, so much relief of pressure around it. You can just walk through it and move through the temporary discomfort a lot of times and get on the other side pretty much unscathed. But if we're fighting it and kicking and screaming going in, that's where we tend to get tumbled around within the experience, and it's not really fun. So if we go in going, okay, we're doing this, we're going in, and we're just going to walk through it with as much, curiosity as we can. And even when you go into something that's uncomfortable, if you know this is so purposeful and I'm learning so much, and if you don't focus on the parts of it that don't feel good, but focus on what you're gaining from it, it really does shift your entire perspective to open up to your potential.
That's wonderful. And I think it's very empowering when you realize that it has been your choice. You are making this journey, and there is that wonderful phrase that Tony Robbins uses, that life is happening for us, not to us. And that, I think, embodies everything that we might perceive that this is not good, this is inconvenient or whatever, or this is a tragedy. But if we realize that this is happening for the growth of our being, and I think by our being, that expands into all beings, doesn't it? So that was one of my own lessons a few years back during my personal development. I always thought that personal development is for me. It's personal, And it took me a while to realize that that's really not the case, because the more I grow, the more everything grows. So my personal development is collective development. It made a big difference when I realized that.
Yes, that's so true. And, to even expand on that point even more from an energetic perspective, I see a lot of people who are really givers and overgivers, and they have a hard time dedicating time to themselves and their own development. And what I see energetically is, let's say you're working and you're helping 10 people in your environment, but you are completely depleted. So you can help those 10 people, and the work that you do will branch out from those people. The effort is well paid off. But energetically, when someone dedicates time to themselves and raises their vibration, that lift and upliftment expands exponentially, and it touches the collective consciousness in a way that is unimaginable. So just from dedicating time inside, you're helping the masses in ways that you can't even imagine. So it's like when I started to see that and recognize how that energetic work within and just self-care, soul care within helped so many other people, I was sold. And I thought, it does really, as you serve yourself, you serve others. And when you can wrap your head around that sort of expansive perspective, it makes it even more worthwhile when you do it, because you can see the reach.
Awesome. Jen, I would like to switch a little bit our conversation. It was something that we started discussing before we started recording, and it was a very fascinating topic. And so I want us for sure to go through it. And that was about the transitioning of identity. And I was telling you that I had personally my own, and I think many people can relate to that, maybe it's during the 40s. I don't know if it is always at that age, but for many people is around that age that they feel that big, gap of what is going on, where I'm going to be. And I found for myself that the identity that I had carried with me during, let's say, the first 40 years or whatever it was of my life is rather hard to detach from in order to move towards the new, better, or however you want to call, version of yourself. So please tell me your thoughts about that. I find this topic very fascinating, about identity and all these things.
There's so much that is attached to our past and our backstory. And it seems that a lot of people are always turning backwards to identify, well, this happened in the past, so therefore this is true. Or I experienced this in the past, I showed up in the past this way, so therefore that is true. And we focus mostly on that backstory. But if we're wanting to make change and do something different, we really do need to start to turn in the other direction, start to shift the momentum into the potential of something versus just what once was. And it's really challenging sometimes for people to bridge that gap, just because the transitional point can be really uncomfortable because it's confusing. We don't like to be confused. We want to know what's going on, where we're going next, where we need to turn, how many minutes it's going to be till we get to that turn. That's what kind of makes you feel safe. So when you start to trust in the process and know that whatever decision you make is going to be okay. Just make one decision, make a decision, see where it leads you. And as you learn to really trust your intuitive process, you get better and more refined at making decisions that are in alignment with where you're going. But it's really recognizing if you're feeling stuck and if you're feeling resistance. So I see a lot of people, one person in particular, a friend of mine, who is in such resistance. She's very challenged with finding peace in her life. And she continues to repeat experiences that are really uncomfortable. And we have conversations and I say, well, you could try this, you could try that. And she says, well, it's hard because. So she's in a lot of resistance to shifting. So sometimes people really do just kind of need to stay there until life gets so uncomfortable that they're like, I'm done. We're done here. We need to do something, anything different. And then all of a sudden they break wide open and they're ready for something different. And at that point, it's kind of like a supernova of energy that happens. It's almost like this explosion of shifting and change comes in all at once. But traditionally speaking, those of us that are kind of on path intentionally, when we're in that transitional point, you have pieces from the past coming in that tells you who you are. You have kind of your higher self guiding you to who you can be, who you are inside, but haven't expressed yet. And you have your future self that's kind of drawing you and inspiring you and beckoning you into your potential. So within that frame of experience, you've got a lot of conflicting energies. So at that point, it really is about choice and what feels the best. But what happens is we only allow ourselves to dip in there slightly, and then we pull back out because of the busyness of life or, other things that are happening, people's expectations. But if we allow ourselves to kind of settle into the experience and really feel, the more we can feel and identify with what feels good, what feels aligned, then it's much easier to move in the direction of where you're choosing to go. And the other thing that happens is people can tend to focus so much on what they're leaving behind that keeps them stuck, as opposed to focusing on what they're gaining if they choose to move forward. So it is a lot of perception shifts, but because the mind runs in a default way, you have to be mindful of your thoughts. And when you can catch yourself thinking the thoughts that are keeping you stuck and mindfully and intentionally shift them, all of a sudden you start to create a much different reality for yourself just based on what you're thinking. And so if you think about, thoughts basically create our emotions. So if you're tied to something from the past and that makes you feel safe, you're going to want to stay there. But if you can follow that in a little bit more and say, but that is keeping me in a place of stagnancy, I'm going to start to think this and think about it in the potential, feel the expansiveness in your field, in your emotions, in your joy. And it's easier to kind of lean into that place. But it really does, just take a little bit of dedicated time in that space of recognizing what you really want. And the more you can feel that resonance of it, it's much easier to move that way in the 3D.
I get this in a different way. The message or something that comes between the lines of what you have been saying, like this during our conversation with accepting what is, how we feel inside. I know that's not the words that you used, but it was like the underlying message that has been coming to me, maybe because I am seeking for it personally. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah. So if we can get into a little bit.
Sure.
Okay.
It's too fascinating to let go now.
Yeah. So I would love even just to learn a little bit more about what your experience is, to use that as an example of how to kind of move through. Are you finding that you have, resistance to moving into something new? Is there fear that surfaces?
Sometimes, it's not so much resistance of what is coming. It's more reluctance to let go of what has been, which, everything and whatever I have done in my life has served me up to this point. And you mentioned earlier, and I think it was Einstein who said that if you want different results, then you have to do something different. You can't do the same things and expect different results. Mine was, since you asked about me personally, it was more a heaviness of that old identity, like holding on to me. More than I would like it to. I would like it not to be so heavy, shall we speak, just so I can put it down and just move on to the compelling future that I envision, I see, and I'm moving towards. But, when you have something that you drag along with you, it slows you down. It's better if you just, chop it off and sort of speak.
Right. Well, and what I see is from when the emotional body comes in, there is a lot of safety and security that's attached to that. Yes. And there's a lot of substance that's attached to that, just because that experience was attached to many different facets of your life. And so when people think about releasing a big part of themselves, it also almost feels like this fear of loss, of losing more of themselves than what's just contained within that particular experience. So it really is about taking some pause within that and really seeing what have I gained from this experience? Do I feel fulfilled within that? Am I ready to retire that? And what I see, it's really funny. When I'm getting into people's energy bodies, if they're holding on to something, and I never force my way into anything, right? But if I try to remove it and they're like, nope, I want to suck that back in and hold that, I'm like, okay, we're not ready to let it go yet. Yeah. So let's see what's going on. And what is really effective a lot of times is, I'll ask the energy body, well, can we just shelve it? We have this, let's say we have this warehouse right over here. Can we just put that over here? So we're not necessarily holding it, but we don't have to bury it at the same time, because that's a real extreme that we think we have to do, which then makes us want to hold it. Because we think, what if we need that? What if we need a part of that and it's gone? And so that can really contract people into that space of holding. But if we just say, we really have so much gratitude for how this has served us and these lessons that we learned, and we're just going to place it over here just so we don't have to carry it right now and hold it. And even just freeing your hands of holding it or gripping it, all of a sudden you start to open to new opportunities coming in. And when you start to feel the new stuff coming in, you think, oh yeah, I don't even want that anymore. I don't even know why I was so attached to that. And it just becomes this default way of clearing it. But when we focus on, we have to let this go, go, then there's a part of us that says, I don't have to do anything. I don't want to do that. When we're forced to do things, we question it. But when you can give yourself kind of the ease with it and just say, okay, this can stay as long as it wants to, and I'm just going to choose to not let it impede my forward progression and my movement. And it's going to just fall away when it's ready to, and focus less on its presence, but more on just where you're going. Sometimes that can alleviate some of that pressure to hold and grip, because it's a very natural response to want to hold something that you've been attached to for a long time, especially when it's provided you with so much.
Yes. The word acceptance comes to mind, the way that you said, just fully accept it and without judging it.
Yes, exactly. And when we can really just kind of open to whatever it is without the expectation of it, a lot of times it's like, oh, okay, there's nothing to fear here. There's nothing to grip here. And it just becomes a bit more of a flow and an ease with that. And then, you can really step into the transition a little bit more easily. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. That's great. It's a fascinating conversation, and I know there are so many things that we could talk about. Very different elements. So I'm also trying to have some kind of I'm trying to find the right word.
Some direction, focus,
or
yes.
direction, yes.
Yes, I know. It's a lot of tangents we could go off on.
I would like to start wrapping things up, and I will ask you some quick fire questions, which I always ask my guests. So the first one, because it is a podcast about personal development, my first question is, what does personal development mean to you?
That's a good question. I think that it really is getting to know yourself, recognizing your needs, your desires, what feels good to you, being able to move in that direction, and just a deeper understanding of self, to me, is personal development. Because when you can understand what's happening within there, you can really consciously create your world. But until you sort of know what you even want, it's really hard to create from that place. You just sort of take the scraps of whatever you're running into. So I think it's know thyself, I would say, in the most brief form.
Absolutely. Let's say you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self. What's the one piece of advice you would give her?
She was a little rebel. I would probably advise her to focus less on all the moving parts of life and feeling like she needs to save everybody, and start focusing, be more discerning of where her energy went, and really focusing on the ones that are asking and ready for the help, as opposed to trying to pull everybody up that just really wants to stay there. So be more discerning with energy and focus more on self, because it's really such a valuable process. And the more understanding we have of ourselves, the greater understanding we have of others. So it's a really relevant piece of this life experience here, is to do that.
And Jen, let me ask you one more hypothetical question. If you could wave a magic wand and change something in the world as it is today, what would you change?
That's an interesting question. I feel like the world it's really kind of messy right now. And I don't even know if I would clean that up if I could, just because I feel like it's such a relevant part of the process to be in the mess. But I would kind of sprinkle some fairy dust on those people who might not be able to see yet, that could really benefit so much from just a bit more consciousness, a bit more awakening, a bit more open-mindedness or curiosity about their process, just to help them move through the suffering in a more gentle way.
And emerging from this conversation that we had today, I was telling you earlier that I really believe in giving the listener some action that they can take. It's not just about listening to conversation or gaining information. So if you were to give to the listener one actionable item based on everything that we discussed, what would you choose?
I would say to be aware of when you are in states of suffering, because that's a choice to stay there, and you can choose something different. And when you recognize you're in that state, the only thing you need to do is have the awareness of that. And the more consistently you can have awareness of that, your life automatically starts changing, because you're just breaking that cycle. And then the road, you can travel that road further, but just the awareness alone and choosing, I don't want to stay there, is and can be life-changing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you want to also tell us about your course, your Limitless course?
Yeah. Oh, it's my labor of love. I recognized that I want to help. I mean, my mission in life has always been to help up-level humanity. And when I say that, it always sounds so ridiculous because it just feels like a really big job. But like, why did I come in here believing that? But it really is true. I just really love to see people thrive and to grow. And so I was recognizing that I couldn't reach as many people by doing the one-on-ones, and my schedule was getting really booked. And I felt limited with my own ability to reach masses. And I recognized how powerful coursework could be with even developing something and delivering it. And all these people were writing in saying, oh my gosh, this has been life-changing. And I didn't even have a personal conversation with them. So I started to recognize how powerful that could be and how many more people I could reach and still have time to myself. So I developed Limitless, and it really gets into how to identify limiting beliefs and how you're creating a reality, how to manage triggers when they come in, how to see what's actually going on inside versus what you think in your perception of what's going on based on the limiting beliefs, how to manage that self-sabotaging inner critic voice, those judgmental perfectionistic voices that come in that are really trying to help us, but they come in a way that doesn't really build us up into feeling good, but it really kind of breaks us down. So how to identify that, how to nip it, and really helping people work through relationship blocks, abundance blocks, because when you build a foundation that is strong, where you understand yourself, then moving into things like abundance and healthier relationships is like a default program that automatically up levels. So we remove the rickety foundation of what once was, build into a new one, and then I help people to expand in all the branch work of other things that aren't working in their lives externally. So I find it just to be a really powerful structure and kind of a step-by-step to help people move through it. And just because I really enjoy watching people thrive and I want to be there as a teacher, because that's my favorite thing to do, I'm present with people throughout the course as well. So we do every other week live calls with me. They can ask questions. We help them work through things just to really keep the momentum flowing so they don't have to stay stuck. So that's my most recent labor of love.
And where would you direct people that want to find more about you and the course?
Yeah, so my website, 𝗃𝗄𝗄𝗃, and I also offer a free training on there called How to Stop Limiting Beliefs from Sabotaging Your Future. So there's a little video on there that people can access, and as well as I introduce the Limitless course towards the end of that video, and I also offer a discount for people who might be interested in diving a little bit deeper into that work.
Jean, is there anything you were really hoping we would talk about today and we completely missed it?
Boy, I mean, there's so much to talk about all the time.
Of course.
I will say just one last thing as we wrap up. You had talked about identities before, and I am seeing so much of that in the collective consciousness. And I think that when people can recognize that their lineage and their ancestral programs, to kind of challenge those things sometimes, because we just live on those things by default so much, and we identify with that we kind of lose sight of who we are. So I would encourage people to really see who they are as people, independent from those around them or those they grew up with, just to start to identify with who they are as people, because we really are in such a time of great change, and all the systems that aren't working right now are breaking free and breaking loose. And so people really do have the chance to reinvent themselves in a way that I've never seen before in my 2 decades of experience. So the potential right now is primed right now for transformation and change and really coming into your true self and your essence. So I would just encourage people to explore that part and what they really want. And when you ask people, what do you want? They go into, well, I know I don't want blah, 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 blah. And that's great. That's a great place to start. I love that they're having to have a response to that, because a lot of people don't even know that. So if you know what you don't want, you're closer to getting into what you do. But push yourself a little bit further as to exploring, what is it that you want? And what would bring you joy? What feels good in your heart space? What feels like you can exhale within that experience? And the more people can identify with what helps them feel good, they get more clear about what they want. So I think it's a really important part of this journey right now, is to identify that stuff.
100%. And many people, when I ask them, when they asked what you don't want, it's like they have rehearsed it. They will give you the very detailed answer. And then you ask, okay, so what do you want? Oh, that's a good question. So I will certainly say that as well, and echo what you just said about really defining what it is that we want and putting the time to discover it within ourselves. Jen, it has been a truly captivating conversation for me. Thank you very much for your time and your sharing your wisdom with us today. I want to wish you all the very best in your mission of, empowering the whole, everything.
The whole planet.
Yes. Any last parting words?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and your questions and the depth of them. I really, really enjoyed this experience as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and rate it on Apple Podcasts. And also share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to find out more about what I do and gain access to exclusive content, join my Facebook group Personal Development Mastery. The link is in the show notes, or you can simply type bit.ly/PDM group. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in.